right to be as cynical as everyone seems to be being about Biden's visit to Ulster?
He won't achieve very much. He's the most Irish president since JFK. He's very proud of his Irish roots. He's going to spend far more time in Southern Ireland because that's going to be great for votes and it'll look great back home. And I just don't think he's going to have much cut-through with the DUP in a way that Bill Clinton did 25 years ago. Hugely significant world figure.
They won't trust him because of his Irish ancestry.
To some extent, that's true, but you keep the show on the road. You show the eyes of the world are still on Northern Ireland. People are willing for there to be peace and a resumption of power sharing in some way, for people to live in a community in a better way than they did before the Good Friday Agreement.
The significance of him actually being there, we shouldn't necessarily
important.
pin our hopes on, what's going to come of it.
No, he's not going to be a saviour, and there's not going to be a huge breakthrough because of him.
No.
Well, he's only there for 10 seconds.
Yeah, and then he can't wait to get across the border.
He can't wait to get across the border.
And then there'll be pictures of where his family from, or his great-great-great-grandparents and all that sort of stuff.
That's been noticed by, of course, some in the Protestant community, the DUP, that he toe touches in Northern Ireland and he can't wait to get over the border, they say. But it's still better he goes than he doesn't.
He's only the second Roman Catholic president of the United States, bizarrely, JFK being the first one.
Of course, yes.
And again, you know how traditions are in Northern Ireland, that will also be a factor in the DUP.
Well, many people are moving on from the old, have moved on from the old divisions, but there's a bedrock on
one or two
on
in the
both
unionist
sides.
community haven't.
OK, well, let's speak to Brendan Hughes now. Let's pick up with him. Good morning to you, Brendan. Just talk us through, then, how the visit is being viewed there.
Well, I think there's two different perspectives here. I think from one perspective, I think a lot of people will be welcoming of a US president spending time in Northern Ireland. Of course, we've had many different US presidents who have come to Northern Ireland over recent decades, and this is no exception. And I think a lot of people will see that as an opportunity to put Northern Ireland on the world stage and to really encourage people to come to Northern Ireland and invest in Northern Ireland. And that seems to be the message that Joe Biden and others, such as the US Special Envoy to Northern Ireland, Joe Kennedy, will be trying to push whenever they're here today, and Joe Kennedy over the next couple of days. But of course there will also be, as your panellists have been discussing, there will be concerns as well, and some people from, I suppose, a unionist perspective who really see Joe Biden really as a very green Irish president, someone who wears their Irish roots and their Irish ancestry really on their sleeve. And so therefore, for Joe Biden in particular, I don't think he's seen as really an impartial broker in relation to Northern Ireland issues. A lot of unionists will have not been happy with the US perspective and Joe Biden's stance in relation to Brexit negotiations over the years, particularly Joe Biden and the US administration's support of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And indeed, only a couple of miles away from here, we had, during those discussions and negotiations about the Northern Ireland Protocol, whenever unionists were opposed to the Northern Ireland Protocol, you would have seen Joe Biden's face alongside the likes of the Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar on posters, anti-protocol posters in predominantly loyalist areas of Belfast. So I think that there will be a lot of people, as I say, who will be welcoming of a president, a US president, coming to Northern Ireland, even if it is for a fleeting visit. But of course there will be those, particularly from a unionist perspective, who really won't be that fussed at all.
Well, you refer to it as a fleeting visit. That's almost giving it credit. He's barely going to get his coat off before he's back on the plane heading down to Dublin. However well it may be being hidden over there in Ulster, is anybody taking offence at the fact that he's only there for about 10 seconds?
Well, I think people are reflecting on the context, really, and I think people are acknowledging the context that there is. I think because we do not have a power-sharing executive up and running, because the DUP is continuing to block power sharing and the devolved government in Northern Ireland in protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol and trading issues post-Brexit, as well as continuing to consider the Windsor Framework Deal and what that means for Northern Ireland. That means that really there was nothing really for the US president to come and celebrate here today as part of the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. So I think while he is going to be reflecting on the Good Friday Agreement, I think instead the message is pivoting towards looking at the future, and that's why really he's holding his keynote speech here at the new Ulster University campus, which is a huge £350 million investment in the city centre. And I think he'll be looking really towards the future and trying to push that message with the storming parties that really peace and prosperity and political stability can deliver economic benefits, and that the US wants to support that.
Rishi Sunak's going to get his 10 minutes, to bend the president's ear. What do we think he's going to say? I mean, is he going to talk about issues that are strictly local there, or do you think he's going to be pursuing a different agenda with... I mean, you don't get that much time with the president. He's going to make the most of it, isn't he?
I think he's definitely going to make the most of it, and I think that Rishi Sunak and the UK government wanted to have their place in this visit because obviously it's a 4-day visit to the island of Ireland, but as I say, it's going to be a very passing visit to Northern Ireland, and I think that the fact that Rishi Sunak made the effort to greet the president whenever he arrived in Belfast last night, I think that was important. But I think in terms of the issues that they will be discussing, I think it's really about trying to rebuild relations and to reinforce those relations between the UK and the US, because this is a president who really sees himself as an Irishman, someone of Irish ancestry, but the Prime Minister and the UK government will be wanting to ensure that they maintain those links with the US because, of course, beyond the Brexit negotiations, beyond the criticism, beyond the tensions that there have been over those years, the UK wants to try and have some sort of trade deal with the US coming off the back of this, and so therefore these sorts of events will be important in maintaining those relationships.
OK, Brendan, thanks very much for that. I mean, there is this question, isn't there? We were talking about it a bit earlier, about whether it's a bilat or a bilatte, because, because Number 10 are saying, oh, it's a bilateral session, and the White House are saying, oh, no, they're just having a quick coffee.
I know. Well, that sums it up, really. We still go on, don't we, about the special relationship between Britain and the United States, and we like to think...
That's a one-way street.
Yeah, is it one-sided?
It's not as special as we'd like it to be.
Begging and subservient. I listened to an incredibly painful call with Number 10's spokesman yesterday about whether it was a coffee or a bite. And I thought, look, if it's going to be a coffee, it's still going to be hot by the time they go apart. It looks like it's going to be so fleeting, but Sunak's right to go and try and get some time.
And he does get on better. Sunak gets on better with Biden than Boris because there was absolutely no time. Yeah. They had no time for each other at all. And there will be a little bit of progress on a deal on minerals, a trade deal on minerals, which they'll probably announce, but it'll be pretty minor. The big trade deal is still a long way off.
The U word has been used more and more in discussions that I've been hearing in interviews like this and on the radio, unification. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, when the Troubles were still flaring, there was just no prospect of Northern Ireland and an island coming together. But I keep hearing it being discussed as something which is coming down the tracks. Is it? Are we going to see a unified Ireland?
But one of the reasons I think the DUP don't want to go into this power-sharing arrangement at Stormont is because the First Minister, for the first time, will be Sinn Féin.
Sinn Féin, yeah.
And that... They just can't bear the thought of it. And if Sinn Féin are running the show in Northern Ireland, the idea then of a united Ireland becomes a little bit more...
Because the demographics have shifted, haven't they?
They have.
Yeah, yes, in favour of the Catholics. Also, attitudes are changing in Northern Ireland because at one time you could point over the border at the Republican line and say it was poor and backward. Right? You can't do that anymore. No. There is a provision in the Good Friday Agreement for the Secretary of State, the Northern Ireland Secretary, to trigger what's called a border poll. But the wording gives the Secretary of State great leeway over when that point would be. But you could see... maybe at the end of our lifetime, middle of yours, Charlotte.
Thank you very much,
that there could be a poll, there could be a referendum.
And the idea, the threat, we've always thought the threat to the Union is Scotland with the Scottish National Party, but that is dead in the water, particularly with the crisis over Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP. And I've now thought for a long time that more likely the unions to break down could be with the United Ireland, and that would be very sad.
You're right, because...
But it's a more natural fit, isn't it?
But the majority of people in Northern Ireland wanted to remain in the European Union. They voted against Brexit. They voted to stay in. That's why you can now... If you live in Northern Ireland, you can identify and have a passport as the UK, British, or the Republic of Ireland, or both.
So a referendum on unification would also be a referendum on rejoining the EU?
Could be, but of course there are lots of... I mean, there are other issues, like what do you do with the future of the health service? You don't have the NHS in Republic of Ireland, you know, the payment system, and so on. So there'll be huge issues, but you can see Northern Ireland's becoming greener, and Andrew is right, it's what the DUP fear.
But that's why, because it's all in limbo. How long is it going to be in limbo for, with the power-sharing agreements?
Well, there'll be, when they're elected, I think there are elections in May, and if the DUP get whacked, which I think they will, they may realise they've got to go back into power sharing, but then it puts Sinn Féin at the centre stage.
It's been since the Northern Ireland Assembly was established, it's not sat, been in limbo for 40% of the time, 2/5 of the time.
Sinn Féin were always walking out.
Yes, no, it's been on both sides here. I do wonder...
at the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, Sinn Féin had pulled out.
I think I'm coming around the idea, if it's suspended, don't pay them. Don't pay the member, and let's see what happens there.
Just very quickly, what do we think about this rather mischievous theory that's going around, that one of the reasons that Biden's only there, as I say, for an hour or so, is because they're just terrified of him making gaffes, and the one place you don't want to make gaffes is Ulster.
He'll be on script the whole time.
He will, won't he?
I'm sure there won't be a press conference.
I think 40 million Irish-American voters is why he's in. He's in there, really. And, of course, he wants to get across the border because that's where he's from. That's where his family are from, and he's proud of his roots.
And he'll be talking about his great-grandmother, is it his great-great-great-grandmother who lived there, from County Mayo.
That is going to be interesting, actually. Just on a human scale, it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to that.
It's an interesting... And it's from, of course, his family from one of the poorest parts of Ireland.
All right, for now, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Brendan.
The US President Joe Biden will be holding a meeting with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in Belfast this morning. It's part of an historic 4-day trip to the island of Ireland.
Well, as I'm sure you know, Mr Sunak greeted the President at the steps of Air Force One last night, ahead of the engagements to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement.
Our chief correspondent Richard Gaisford is in Belfast this morning, and Juliet Dunlop is in Dublin, where the President will be travelling to later on. Good morning to you, Richard. Let's come to you first. We know the President's talked about, keeping the peace being his main aim. He's got this speech at Ulster University later. Do we know, then, what he's expected to talk about?
I think he set out the aims as he got on board Air Force One, says that he wants to keep the peace deal on track, try and help find some sort of solutions for the issues that are crippling government here at the moment, which means very little is getting done and creating a very unstabilised environment for people to live and to work in. His speech here at the University of Ulster is really going to be the one big event of this trip to Northern Ireland. He's going to spend almost as much time in his hotel as he would have done in meetings and talking to people here in Northern Ireland. Expectations are low. It's fair to say that no one is really stoking up the excitement either for this speech or any of the meetings he's likely to have around it, with no real thought that he's able to deliver anything new to solve any of these issues.
A whirlwind visit to Northern Ireland started in stormy conditions. Rishi Sunak greeting Joe Biden and members of his family who've joined the President for what will largely be a personal journey of discovery south of the border. Amid tight security, Mr Biden spent the night in Belfast city centre, one of just a few chances for the public here to see the fourth US president to visit. Bill Clinton became the first to make the trip in 1995, doing a walkabout along the Shankill Road, scene of so much violence during the Troubles. So, will President Biden get as warm a welcome?
I think it's a brilliant thing for Northern Ireland. I'm really excited, and it's nice to see all the buzz about it and stuff.
In the hours before the much-expected arrival, 4 pipe bombs were discovered in Derry, a sign perhaps of challenges facing Northern Ireland at a time that its devolved government is paralysed and suspended by disagreement over the Brexit trade deal and the Windsor framework designed to solve it. Expectations that Joe Biden can help remain low.
This isn't Bill Clinton, it's not even Barack Obama. Everything's very understated, very muted. It's not so much a celebration of the Good Friday Agreement, but maybe just a contemplation.
Much focus will fall now on what the President says at Ulster University later, where he'll also meet political leaders after an early meeting with Rishi Sunak for bilateral talks. The President will then head south in search of his ancestral roots. He'll have spent less than a day in Northern Ireland, a presidential visit, however short the duration, which is perhaps better than none at all. Richard Gaisford, Good Morning Britain.
Well, you've been messaging us on this story, and it's really split, actually, opinion out there. Really divided. Susan on Twitter says, don't underestimate the American input here in Northern Ireland. It helped get us where we are today. Peace is the way forward. Whereas Jeffrey has emailed us to say, look, Biden's visit to Northern Ireland is all about the US and him electioneering the Irish-American vote. So on that note, let's go to Juliet Dunlop, who's in Dublin for us, where, as we said, the President will be flying later today. He's due to meet extended family. How is his visit south of the border likely to be received, Juliet?
Well, I think there's certainly building excitement and anticipation here, Richard. In contrast to his fleeting visit to Northern Ireland, President Biden is spending 3 days in the Republic, a significant amount of time. And as you say, he is a proud Irish American, so in many ways something of a homecoming for him on this visit. He's also here, interestingly, with his sister Valerie and also his son Hunter. There will, of course, be official business in Dublin, but he is absolutely taking time out to explore his ancestral roots. So this afternoon he'll arrive here in Dublin. He will then, however, head to County Louth. He will see where some of his ancestors are buried, but he will be taking time out to meet the public. There will be walkabouts in Carlingford and also the border town of Dundalk. People there really excited and very pleased indeed that a president coming to see them.
My own great-great-grandparents would have been in the same era as Joe Biden's great-great-grandparents. They would have lived up, reared together, you know. So it has special memories.
Now, on Thursday, it is the official business part of this trip. We know that he'll have a meeting with the Irish president. He'll also have a meeting with the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar. He will also address both Irish parliaments. Then there will be an official banquet. But once again, on Friday, taking time out, this time to head west to County Mayo, again visiting those roots. And this is where his great-great-grandfather set sail in 1851 for America. So a really special point, perhaps, in the visit. But certainly this is all about the political and the personal for Joe Biden, exploring and celebrating those Celtic connections.
Setting aside the political aspect to it, I do find the human angle really interesting.
I know. Well, I'm just reading here. So he's going to visit the cathedral where his great-great-great-grandfather, Edward Blewett, sold 27,000 bricks to the cathedral, and that was how he was able to fund that ticket. So you just need to be able to go there and look at it and think 27,000 of those bricks were sold by my great-great-great-grandfather, and then that enabled him to buy his ticket.
I eat that stuff up with a spoon. I love it.
Amazing. Yeah.
Great stuff.
Well, there we go. That's all happening over the next few days. It is our top story this morning.